Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at BTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at the developing political situation in the country, especially, of course, since the Prime Minister in an interview on Tuesday spoke about the new census also being incorporated in the upcoming elections, and the fact that it will be based on the results of the new census, which of course means that there will be a change in the delimitations of the constituencies and possibly a delay in the elections. And this is important, especially in terms of how this impacts the current political dynamic, who the caretaker setup is going to be, what sort of challenges exist, especially in terms of the legal and constitutional question marks that the ECP will also have to consider. And then, of course, the kind of response that the different coalition parties are going to be taking in with this particular development. We, of course, know that the PPP is perhaps not happy with this particular situation. But, of course, it is again reiterated that consensus is going to be important and that all coalition parties will be taken forward. How exactly will that pan out, and what sort of developments are taking place with that regard, of course, is something that still remains to be seen. But whether or not, as we move forward, this is something that is set in stone and that's something that will not change and will be on the basis of the new census results is going to be interesting, especially in terms of how now we're very close to the dissolution of assemblies, as it is being said by the ruling elite that they will be dissolving before the end of the tenure, which means just a few days more are left with the current government. And still there seems to be no consensus yet on who it is who's going to be taking up with the caretaker setup. And so if we're talking about somebody who's going to be in for the long run, this then becomes an even more significant question. So we're going to be taking a look at all of these issues and what it means for the country and how moving forward is going to impact the election dynamics. At the same time, we also know there's also talk about the atmosphere of democracy of elections, which seem to be missing according to a lot of politicians and parliamentarians, and this is also something that is being spoken about with reference to the PTI chairman and the way that the political dynamic exists and how that needs to be perhaps amended. A suggestion coming in from leaders such as from the IPP. We've also taken a look at the development with regards to the ECP, also issuing a notice to the chairman PTI to appear tomorrow, and if not, a possibility of the PTI symbol being declared ineligible for the PTI is also going to be something that is part of the horizon. So we're going to explore that further as well, and what sort of implication does the entire factor of the PTI chairman is in terms of the delay in elections. We're also going to be taking a look in our next segment at the situation in the neighborhood, especially the kind of communal violence that we've been seeing, unfortunately, for quite some time now, particularly in Haryana, and of course now it's spread to other areas as well. And what sort of dynamics are being used, especially in terms of the way that this is being politicized, the way that the states has been involved in it, and of course the BJP's role previously as well, and now too there are of course reports about the fact that this is something in relation to the upcoming elections in India next year, and that as previously done so, the communal violence is being used as a way forward to talk about an anti-Pakistan narrative, something which supports the Hindutva ideology of the BJP. And we've also been seeing a smear campaign being put in reference to these clashes, particularly also a mob that was reported to be chanting pro-Pakistan slogans while it attacked a Shiv temple. And this is important, especially in terms of the kind of hatred it is breeding and the way that that hatred is then being used to achieve political gain. So we're going to be taking a look at that as well at the end of the show today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analysts Farrukh Pitafi and Faisal. We've also been joined online by political analyst Dr. Niaz Murtaza. Thank you very much, everyone, for being part of the show. Let me start with you, Dr. Niaz. The situation, of course, in terms of the current political climate is extremely important, and there seems to be a change of direction, especially since we heard the Prime Minister speak about the results of the new census being incorporated, and that, of course, puts into the situation into an unquestionable delay. But at the same time, there seems to be a lot of challenges that are being spoken about, a lot of reservations being raised about how exactly that is going to actually affect the situation. And I want you to explain to us the significance and importance of actually incorporating the results of the census and how vital they are to the current elections, and whether or not that vitality is something that still shines through when we speak about the kind of delay that eventually will be seen if this is done.
Well, I can imagine, the sentiment that, Pakistan has done this brand new census, and, it's been done using the latest technology. And from what I read, Pakistan is ahead, especially in the South Asia region in terms of, doing a census digitally with such advanced technology. But I think it's a bit late in the day to start thinking about it. First thing is, till about a week or 10 days ago, the government seemed to be very clear that it's too late to try to incorporate the results of the new census for the purpose of holding this election. And there were clear indications from several ministers that the elections are going to be held on the basis of the old census, which, by the way, is not that old. There was a time when there wasn't a census held in Pakistan for almost 2 decades. But that is not the situation today. The last census was just held about 6 years ago in 2017. So, in a sense, this census was held ahead of time. Uh, but now the situation is that the first problem is that despite the use of all the latest technology, there is still a lot of grumbling about the final results, especially say from MQM, which says that it's not going to accept any results of the new census which don't show Karachi's population is around what, three I think like three
30 million people.
yeah, whatever, a fairly high figure. I don't remember the figure they gave. So there is the fact that, if the census had high degree of, acceptability across the whole country, that would have been one thing. But now the situation is that, there's a lot of parties which are raising questions about, how accurate this census is. Then, the second issue is that, if even if everybody accepts the result, there is the issue of how you're going to incorporate it. Suppose, the census results show that the proportion of population among the provinces has changed, and the number of seats, say, in province X has increased, whereas the number of seats in province Y has gone down. How are you going to change that? Because that's all constitutionally mandated. The number of seats that you can have in any province, that's written in the constitution. So that means if you want to change the number of seats in Punjab versus Sindh, you have to have a constitutional amendment, and there is no assembly. There is no time, first of all, and then there's not even the numbers in the assembly to do a constitutional amendment. So I think this is just going to open a Pandora's box, and I think ultimately things will go to the court, and they will have to weigh in all these factors and then give a judgment on that. I think the best thing that the government can do is to just duck the issue, and just aim to hold the elections on the basis of the old census.
Right, absolutely. And I'll explore that further. But Faisal, given the fact that what Dr. Niaz was earlier also saying, there seems to be a change in direction, and a lot of people were surprised by the way that the Prime Minister spoke about the way that the results of the new census will be incorporated as compared to what previous leaders of the PMLN was saying. And so this poses the question whether there is any sort of change in the dynamic or any sort of incident or event or consideration by the current ruling elite that was factored in this particular decision, and that this decision was then taken, and what may that be, and is it important or significant enough to bear the kind of costs and challenges that were being outlined just now?
Asana, if we politically, observe everything which is taking place nowadays, of course, you have mentioned that Interior Minister a couple of weeks ago, of course, he talked about that the previous census, which was conducted in 2017, elections would be held according to that. And now, of course, we know that yesterday, Prime Minister of Pakistan, he has highlighted that, of course, the digital census is the priority, and it will be conducted. And as we discussed yesterday, that it will take time. It will take time to compile that census, and then later on, of course, the voter lists and each and everything. The whole process would take a long time. So to me, I think by the looks of it, if we take the example of why only 3 or 4 days just before the assemblies are ending,
Yeah.
the government is going, that means they would already be having one extra month for the political campaign, number one. And number two, if there is this census is another hurdle, then of course in extraordinary circumstances, ECP would be utilizing extraordinary time as well. Normally they will be bound to conduct the election or hold the election within 90 days.
Right.
But in that case, when extraordinary circumstances are there, then they might take a bit longer time. That would be an extra plus for the obviously PDM
Right.
parties.
But Faisal,
to have more
that
time
doesn't
for
answer
the-
my question as to what may be the reason for this change of direction.
A reason to me only feels that they require more time for the campaign, and
Okay.
PDM government, of course, when the government ends, then of course they will be separated into political parties, and it doesn't seem that they will be contesting election as a PDM. Of course they will be contesting election as parties, political parties, so they require more time to build up for the elections, and we know the narratives are very important. So I think if more time is given, then to me I think it would be quite a plus for the political parties to shape up the narratives.
And do you think that that would be worth all the trouble?
It will be. To me, I think it will be, because if we take the example of the one whole year, the last year, so many things has happened, and we have been highlighting here as well that we have always been talking about that there should be consensus amongst the parties related to politics, related to economy. We did not see that. Of course, within PDM we saw it, and that is why we were able to save our economy from crashing. And I think that's how the things can move in future. In coming future, we might see that these are the lines where the election campaigns would be run.
Okay, Farrukh, I want to understand, so especially since we were also talking about this yesterday in terms of the kind of importance that the new census holds in terms of the democratic process, and of course the kind of change that now exists in the voter base. But I want to then understand also, especially given the timing of this decision and the fact that there are going to be numerous challenges ahead, that it is still absolutely necessary that this does happen.
Right, and I want to thank you very much, Sana, for this question, but I want to actually address your earlier question that was posed to my dear brother Faisal,
Sure.
because he has actually, said something which is quite intriguing, that perhaps PDM wants more time, that's why they are going with this plan. I just wanted to know whether PTI is also part of PDM, because this census was commissioned on January 17th, 2022, under the leadership of Imran Khan, the former Prime Minister, right? At that time, PDM was nowhere near the government, and at that time when it was commissioned, the idea was that there were flaws in 2017 census, and they will be taken care of in the next election, in that CCI meeting, and also after that it was said that the elections will be held in accordance with the new census results. So the question that you posed, what actually has caused this change of direction, or whether we are surprised by the Prime Minister's statement. I'm not surprised by the Prime Minister's statement. I was surprised by Rana Sanaullah Saab's statement, and I tell you why. It is crucial that all team members sing from the same hymn sheet, and the biggest problem was that actually came out of blue. Why? Because before we started hearing about that statement or something else, we heard that in the final days of this government, when it will be about to leave the reins of power, at that time they have convened a CCI, Council of Common Interest meeting, right? What is Council of Common Interest meeting? It is essentially a body or bridge between federating units, where you decide, you sound their concerns, and then you decide that the elections or whatever decisions federation has to take, they are taken with consensus or support of the federating units. And what was the agenda number one, Sana? It was the digital census. So I don't know why Rana Saab felt compelled, your namesake actually felt compelled to actually go for this kind of statement, because it was understood that the country will have to go with the new census. And let me ask you one thing. What is the point of a census? It counts heads, right? Number of citizens. Why do you count the number of citizens? Because the state actually has to incorporate their number in planning, and also in their consultation, especially if you claim to be a democracy. Now, I understand what Dr. Saab was earlier saying, that 2017 census is important. It is. But what has happened in these 5-6 years, Sana? Population at that time was shown to be 200 million, right? And it has jumped to 250 million approximately, right? Between these years, you have seen increase of 50 million or 5 crore people.
Yeah.
And it is thought that out of them, 300 million might be eligible to vote. So what is the point of democracy? Is it not to actually consult all citizens? Should we tell those citizens to actually wait for the next elections because right now you are not a proper citizen of the country? My humble submission is that while there's a lot of fog of war or conflict or confusion, especially helped, aided and abetted by our media, the fact is that even if you incorporate the census, the total amount of time that will be needed is only 4 to 6 weeks, not months, not years, only 4 to 6 weeks. And that is the broader extent of it, right? So if that is done, and if it is incorporated, the Article 51, Clause 5 of the Constitution allows the Election Commission to actually definitely with a finite, term in extension, allows it to actually delay the election just to prepare for a more equitable electoral result. So is it a crime to think that that will be included? I think it is important to remember that whatever happened in Punjab and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and the way their elections were delayed have no bearing on this election, because the state of Pakistan, all the forces from Supreme Court to our establishment to the democratically elected government to the head of state, they all agree that now the elections have to take place. So the only thing now is not speculation or these conspiracy theories that the election can be indefinitely postponed, but the idea that there will be only a finite extension to the extent that you are more equitable when it comes to elections and votes. I don't think there's any harm in that. And regarding another aspect as well, because people keep on relitigating all these issues, and somehow all these matters end up in Supreme Court of Pakistan. So if this goes there, Supreme Court of Pakistan is going to ask, first of all, especially if it stops undermining itself and has the full quorum or support of the entire bench, it can ask, why is it that Imran Khan Sahab or PTI chairman commissioned that new census ahead of time? Once it was done, once it was actually approved by the CCI at that time, it actually became a foregone conclusion that in the next elections it is going to be incorporated. It is not merely about Karachi, it is also about Balochistan. Balochistan thinks that their population has seen a substantial increase in population. Why should their citizens or residents not be allowed to vote in the elections?
Yeah. Right.
Similarly, ex-Parta, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So why not actually focus on that as well? Why do we keep on pretending that Pakistan's democracy starts and ends in Punjab?
Right, absolutely. And Dr. Niaz, I'd like to take your comment on that as well, especially in terms of the kind of benefits that perhaps have been outlined in terms of whether or not they outweigh the costs, and add to that now the importance that the caretaker setup will hold, because if this is something that is of course more empowered now and is going to be in place for longer if the elections are delayed, then of course it makes sense to assume that the way that this is now going to be decided upon is also going to be a lot more significant. And then I want to understand whether the entire caretaker setup will be able to take hold of the political, the economic, and then of course with regards to the election, the challenges that will continue.
Well, this is the issue. Like, in the last census, I think the population was around 210 million, and now you're seeing, figures above 240 million. So, there's at least a 30 million increase. Now, all of that cannot be due to, new births from 2017 to 2023. What that shows is that, there was significant undercounting in the 2017 census. So to that extent, the point that Farrukh is making is valid. That you don't want to leave anybody out. You want everybody to have their democratic right. But then, the issue is where we are with, first of all, the different institutions that are supposed to, take care of it. The first step would be, CCI, which has to take a decision. And, the makeup of that is that, it's supposed to be, a forum of, representatives of the different federating units. But for Punjab and KP, you do not have elected chief ministers, really. They are just caretakers who don't really represent, the mandate of those provinces. Then the next issue is about, the relevant institution is Parliament. And Parliament would have to, pass a constitutional amendment, and Parliament would have been dissolved by the time, the issue would go back to it. And, even if it wasn't dissolved, the fact is that, there is no vote to, pass a constitutional amendment. So, you get the new results, and now that results are showing that the number of seats in Punjab should reduce, whereas those in, say, Balochistan should increase. But then how do you do it without, a constitutional amendment? So that is the problem that we face now. We've had significant delays in Punjab and KP already. And if, these are delayed for another 4 to 6 months, then, it may just be 2 to 3 months for the National Assembly and the other assemblies. But for Punjab and KP, it will add up to, maybe even more than a year.
So, I think a quick question to you, sir. Very quick question, because you earlier said that because Balochistan seats might increase, Punjab seats will decrease. Why do you say that, sir? Because in National Assembly, the seats of any provinces are not tethered to the population or seats in the other. In Senate, I grant you that there is a parity between provinces, and that's why the seats will have to be equal. But in National Assembly, because it is the popular house, if you increase the seats of Balochistan, that doesn't mean that Punjab has to forego its seats.
Well, then, you either increase the number of seats, and if you want to increase the number of seats, that also requires a constitutional amendment, because the number of seats are now constitutionally fixed at 342 after you add all the, women's reserve seat and, the minority seats. So either way, you will have to, make a constitutional amendment, because all of these things are written in our constitution. The number of seats in Punjab, every province, the number of seats for these reserves. So it's going to, open a can of worms, and then, ultimately it's going to go back to the Supreme Court. And, before September 16, we will have the same Supreme Court. And if it goes to, the same very infamous bench, then how it handles it, that will be another question. So all of the institutions that are supposed to deal with it, whether it's CCI or the Parliament or the Supreme Court, they are all hobbled in some way or the other. And they are not in a really position to take, decisions that will be, accepted by everybody. So I think all of these things should have been thought about much earlier. And I think I would still say I think the best course of action at the moment is to, let it pass and just hold the elections on the basis of 2017.
Right. And Dr. Niaz, regarding the caretaker setup.
Yes, what was your question about that?
My question was that now, of course, it seems that there will be added responsibility, particularly given the political economic challenges, and then, of course, the elongated time period, and whether or not then the significance of who it is going to be, who's going to lead the caretaker setup, will cause more problems in coming to a consensus with different political parties.
Yes, and that's another very important issue because we just entered into a standby agreement with IMF for 9 months based on the assumption that this will give enough time for the elections to be held and then a new government can come in and do another agreement with a longer term agreement with IMF because we'll be needing the money in a few months. Now, if elections get delayed for say 4 to 6 months, then the question will be that this deal might end, and then we won't have the ability to go back to the IMF and get more money. So I think it's going to open a lot of can of worms. What we really need is this has been such a uh, hobbled parliament and executive because of so many factors. First of all, there were the extremely disruptive politics of PTI, then the fact that it resigned, and then you have two federations that don't have representative governments, and there are so many critical issues, security-wise, external, economic, that require a government with a fresh mandate to quickly come in and start resolving those issues. So if we have this very long caretaker setup, then we will be sort of paralyzed to take major decisions that are crying for some sort of decisions much earlier than the framework that we'll have with elections delayed.
Yeah, Dr. Niaz, if we look at the history, obviously the politics of parties like People's Party, of course we know that they have always fought for democracy in the country. If we look at the politics of PMLN, they have always fought for the democracy in the country. So can we say that in future, if it is a prolonged setup and that is an sort of undefined time we are talking about, then can we say that these two parties who have a history of protesting for democracy in coming future, for election and for democracy, we can see both of these parties doing the protests?
Well, if there had been just the 2008 to 2018 period before me, I would have fully agreed. That was the era where there was more democratic consolidation than the rest of 75 years, except for the 2 years of 72 and 73 when we had our first constitution made. But if you take away 72, 73, and 2008 and 2018, there's hardly anything to talk about in terms of democratic consolidation. So in that sense, you are right that both parties do have a past. But this last year, 1 year has been quite bad in terms of some of the decisions that they have taken. But then again, if you look at the practicalities, then there is still the fact that these are the two only parties which have a track record of doing something for democracy during 2018 and 2018. No other party has that history, irrespective of how badly they have behaved now. So I think it's incumbent that they should keep in mind the way they behaved in 2008 and 2018, where there were so many good initiatives like the devolution through 18th Amendment, the first free and fair elections, and the civilian transfer of power between two fairly elected parties in 2013. The way they came up with the neutral caretaker system, which is unique in the whole government. So, this is the kind of things we should expect from them, and this is what they should be doing, strengthening democracy, strengthening constitution. So it's extra painful when you see even these two parties, behaving more and more like PTI. So I think they should remember their past and, start behaving the way they behaved during 2008 to 2018.
Excellent.
Right, absolutely. Thank you very much, Dr. Niaz, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. Faisal, the way forward, of course, there's a lot of challenges that remain and a lot of question marks that exist. But I want to understand what your response will be to people who are commenting on how the delay or timing of elections is also something that is being determined by the way that the cases are proceeding against the PTI chairman and the possible arrest of the PTI chairman, and of course the way that we're now also seeing reports of the party symbol not being possibly being used in the elections, and whether or not any of these factors are impacting the current situation.
Of course, Sana, all of these factors, they will affect the elections. But talking about the cases, I mean, whatever the cases are, in accordance to Constitution of Pakistan, in accordance to the law, they will be dealt with within the time frame which is obviously prescribed by the law itself. And to me, I think whatever the solution or whatever the outcome of all of these cases is of the chairman of the PTI, this itself is part of our democracy and part of our electoral system, because our democracy, our constitution, our electoral system should not be allowing anyone who is not worthy enough to be ruling us, or worthy enough to be being the leader of the nation. And if the chairman of the PTI comes clean of it, he has every right to do it. And then if he is not, then of course he hasn't got a right to rule Pakistan. And yes, there will be a drawback in terms of there will be outcry, because he has a fan base, and that fan base of course would be chanting around. And in that case they might say, oh, it was a pre-poll rigging or whatever it was. But to me, I think looking at the electoral system we have, and if the elections are taking place in time, in coming future, then I don't think that there will be any difference it would make.
Okay.
And talking about whether people are talking about it, that it is just because they want to keep them out of it, I think this is not the case. I mean,
all right.
They are all in.
All right. Farrukh, the situation, especially in terms of the eventual delay, is important also, of course, in terms of the challenges that will, of course, be part of that. But I want to understand that if there is any possibility of ensuring that there is going to be a timeline to what we're going to then eventually see. Is there any way that the current government or the caretaker setup will be able, or the ECB for that matter, will be able to ensure that this is the cutoff time and we are going to be able to complete the delimitations with the census results and everything that's involved by this time, because we have to conduct the elections? Is there any way to do that?
Absolutely. And I think that is a good question, and I think that unlike Punjab and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, this time you will see that all arms of the government, all the branches of government will be forthcoming with a proper date and a proper timeline, and that will be adhered to. Unlike the previous one, where the judiciary under some influence kept on forcing them to actually come up with some kind of date, and we saw that all that khichdi that was produced. But I wanted to actually go back to what Faisal was. You asked Faisal, and you end up asking him all the juicy questions. But this is a classic mistake, confusing two things. Pakistan is a state which actually follows some kind of law, whether it is Constitution of Pakistan, written laws, or conventions which are unwritten. For example, we keep on accusing the system of being hybrid. And my humble submission has been that since the start of this country, we have had a hybrid system, because the country was faced with a kind of challenge that was astounding. For India, which had its center of government in Delhi even before independence, it was like regrowing a severed limb. And for us, it was for a limb to actually grow back the whole body. So with that kind of a situation, what we did was we ended up finding a balance between civil-military relations, and that continues to this day. My whole point at this moment, Sana, is that even when there's no law, there's always a convention that continues, and that's why you have this basic structure theory of the constitution. But I wanted to also clarify. Right now what we do is we confuse what is political with what is systemic. The political is what happens to PTI's chairman, what happens to PTI itself, what happens to PDM, so and so. What we are looking at is a serious concern about population and about people. So that will be there. I just wanted to clarify two other aspects that Dr. Niaz Mirza, I wish he was still with us, so I could have actually asked him about it as well. But when he kept on talking about a constitution giving seats to each province, I wanted to actually read for your audience's convenience the article and the clause that I mentioned. Article 51, clause 5, and I'm reading from Constitution. It is not merely reading from WhatsApp messages. It says the seats in the National Assembly shall be allocated to each province and the federal capital on the basis of population in accordance with the last preceding census officially published, right? If CCI on the last day actually publishes or announces that it is published in Gazette, then that becomes part of this process.
Okay.
The second thing that he pointed out, that amazingly he said that in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and in Punjab, there's a caretaker setup. With due respect, when it comes to politics and the relationship of federating units, in that all you see is whether there is a person who is heading that is a federating unit or not. So there is a government. We keep on undermining various offices, right? For example, another butt of many jokes is the office of opposition leader. Regardless of whence he came, what party he represents, what exactly is his stature. The fact is that there is an office called opposition leader in the National Assembly, and it is occupied by a person. If you don't, I understand people don't want to take the person seriously, but at least take the office itself seriously.
Right.
Similarly, Punjab and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, so whatever CCI says goes, and I assure you that is exactly what is going to happen.
Okay.
It will be incorporated, but there will be a finite, although a bit delayed, timeline.
All right. We're going to be moving now to the next segment, and we're going to take a look at the small package outlining what is going on in India and continue the discussion then.
On July 31, communal fights broke out in the BJP-ruled state of Haryana during a match organized by the Bajrang Dal and Vishwa Hindu Parishad, two radical groups that support the restoration of India's historic Hindu dominance. A mob was seen throwing stones while cars were set on fire and stores were vandalized in the new footage. More than 50 individuals, including 20 police officers, were also killed, with at least 6 of them being fatalities. The conflict quickly expanded to nearby communities of Faridabad, Pulwal, Gurugram, which are on the outskirts of the capital city of Delhi, and raged for several hours. On August 2nd, a mob burned down a mosque in Gurugram. At least 5 individuals, including 2 security personnel and an imam, have died in the unrest. A curfew has been imposed to maintain order in the areas that have been most negatively impacted. One might anticipate the Sangh Parivar using questionable tactics to help the incumbent BJP gain ground in the polls as India gears up for the general elections early the following year. To stoke the embers of communalism and reassure the BJP's radical voting base that it continues to be tough on minorities, especially Muslims, is one of the Sangh's most effective strategies. This unsettling tendency seems to have continued in the recent violent conflicts. Predictably, dozens of Muslim families may reportedly have left their houses because they feared another mob attack by extreme Hindu organizations and arbitrary police detentions. It further stated that at least 2,000 Muslims, largely men, have left their communities in and around NU, citing a top lawyer and activist from NU. The BJP's hate politics are directly responsible for the recent violent occurrences that have occurred in the various parts of the Indian state. According to Satyapal Malik, the former governor of the Modi government in Jammu and Kashmir, the BJP administration may perform another false flag operation, similar to the Pulwama attack to win the general elections in 2024, which is unlawfully held by India.
Right, so this is what's going on in India. And Faisal, when we take a look at the situation, we've seen previously as well that this is something that unfortunately does occur, especially in terms of election time, and something that the BJP, of course, is also encouraging in terms of the kind of hate politics that they're doing and the kind of responses that we've seen. And now also there is talk in Indian media about pro-Pakistan slogans also being raised by certain mobs that have attacked a temple. And I want to understand that, of course, this link with Pakistan is something that, of course, benefits the political gains of the BJP. But in terms of what is going on and how this is not the first time this is happening, is this not something that it can be made a case out of, or is it not something obvious or apparent enough for it to be taken seriously?
It is to be taken seriously, and I think not only Pakistan, the whole world must take it seriously. The way things move, especially the politics move within India.
But they don't.
They don't. They never do it because they consider India to be one of the largest economy of the world, and of course they want to benefit from it, and they want to keep on using India or pause India against China, and that's how they want to move on. For them, of course, Modi is important because to many, I think Modi is easier to negotiate with. Especially in terms of whatever he's doing right now, it is quite easier for the most powerful countries to negotiate with or to demand anything from him. If we, the current situation, if we look at it right now, I think the best statement which I have been going through so many, but the best statement it appeared from Satyapal Malik, who happens to be former governor of Indian illegally occupied Kashmir. And what he has said is he has openly raised the alarm bells. He says that Pulwama incident, number one, Pulwama incident must be probed, because he believes that it took place just because of one reason, because it was to benefit Modi's election. And he is predicting that very soon we'll see another Pulwama-like false flag attack to generate anti-Pakistan hatred, to generate anti-Muslim hatred within the election 2024, to benefit BJP once more, to benefit Modi once more. And that is what their own former governor of one of the state or occupied state, he is saying it, nobody else is saying it. And if we currently look how things are moving within India, first of all, it started taking place, of course, there is a pattern to it. It started taking place in Uttar Pradesh, which happens to be the largest state and one of the largest population. Their population is as big as Pakistan's population. So in UP, what happens? I mean, torching the mosque, vandalizing, and then Muslims are being tortured. Muslims are being lynched. If we talk about the lynchings, I mean, Gau Rakshaks, who call themselves, the cow saviors, they are out there, nobody stops them, nobody says a single word to them, and they are doing whatever they like, and they're lynching people on the roads, and nobody's stopping them. And if we, talk about the women, the treatment of women is so hateful from the Hindutva ideology that now we are seeing that women are, there is one such example which is being shared on social media as well, with the footage of it, that one Muslim woman, she's being stopped and she's being first told that obviously you're a Muslim, so they are stripping her and they are sexually assaulting her, and then they're beating her, and she's a woman, and they're doing against her. And if we currently look, the pattern, obviously from UP, it gets into Haryana. In Haryana, it's not very far. The location is not very far from the capital itself, New Delhi. And whatever is going on in there, it's a clear message for the whole world that this is what we are doing. Nobody is to stop us. And of course, we are going to utilize this situation once more for the election. And one very important line I want to say, earlier, I was watching that over there, the Hindutva ideology, Rakshaks, they were asking the Indian Muslims to leave India and go to Pakistan because that's where you belong.
Right.
They were born there, their fathers born there, their forefathers born there, and they are telling that you Pakistani and you need to go to Pakistan.
Sure, I understand that. But Farrukh, we of course have spoken about numerous other measures also taken by the BJP before, and why the world doesn't respond or why there's no consequence. And I don't want to explore that further, but I want to understand whether the possibility of change can arise out of India itself, out of the people themselves, especially when we talk about how this is being used as part of the election narrative or to get political mileage. Is this something really still that actually people are convinced of and makes them vote parties such as the BJP?
Right, Sana, and I think yesterday or day before yesterday I explained how Hindu consolidation works, right? India is a segmented country. India has especially the caste system. And by the way, before I actually talk about that, I wanted to actually compliment Faisal on something that reminded me of somebody else, especially his constant ear strokes, right? And repeatedly this kind of expression reminded me of Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, when he was president, if you remember, he went to India. The day he landed in in New Delhi, that is India's capital, that day there was a bloody pogrom going on the streets. And that was a tacit approval that whatever you do, as long as you are doing business with us, we are not bothered. And while the president might have changed in the US, the fact is that Donald Trump was president of that country, and that shows a very critical shift of that country, right? Regarding should we be worried, should I be worried? No, I don't want to be worried about this. Why? The answer is simple. In 1947, there was a visionary man called Muhammad Ali Jinnah who created Pakistan and who predicted that this is going to happen to whosoever remains in India, especially the minorities. The people who chose to come to Pakistan, they are here. And those who remained there, they knew what they are walking into, right? So I couldn't be bothered about that at all. My concern right now, the Hindutva consolidation or Hindu consolidation works by actually baiting and attacking minorities so that they become cultural other, and all the minority upper castes actually monopolize the political space and they consolidate power. 100%. So that is there. But my concern is that now Narendra Modi somehow has reached the Atal Bihari Vajpayee stage, where you have actually done, your hands were dirty, you did whatever you wanted to, but now because you have had the exposure to the world, now you want to be a statesman. I understand that you want to conclude, but I very humbly wanted to just add one line up, that now it is not Modi, it is his underlings who are trying to one-up him by doing that. So if Modi prevails, eventually what we are going to see is perhaps no false flag, and perhaps there's going to be better circumstances. But the underlings want to sabotage, and they can create any kind of havoc.
Right. Thank you, Farrukh. Thank you, Faisal, for joining us. And we, of course, hope that it doesn't happen. But a lot of what has been going on previously points otherwise. That's all that we have from the debate. See you tomorrow.